This past week, the IDF has done a war crimes bonanza. Reports of them shooting people point blank at a school. And also, the IDF literally just an hour ago openly admitted that they shot 3 of their own hostages because they thought that they were Palestinian. There's also another hospital siege that they engaged in this week as well. They also assaulted a Turkish journalist, like a Anadolu Ajansı journalist, in broad daylight in front of cameras. They killed the Al Jazeera cameraman and they injured Wael Dahdu. The Wael is the Al Jazeera like veteran reporter that had his entire family slaughtered by the Israeli occupying force already. First and foremost, breaking news. Israel openly admits that the Israeli military has mistakenly killed 3 Israeli hostages in Gaza. Ramallah, West Bank, the Israeli military on Friday mistakenly killed, this is reporting from Ramallah, West Bank. The Israeli military on Friday mistakenly killed 3 Israeli hostages during its ground operation in the Gaza Strip, military officials said. The Army's chief spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, the one that you know from pointing behind memes, said Israeli troops found the hostages and erroneously identified them as a threat. He said it was not clear if they had escaped their captors or had been abandoned. The deaths occurred in the Gaza city of Shujaiya, where troops have engaged in fierce battles against Hamas militants in recent days. He said the army expressed deep sorrow and was investigating. They literally shot escaping hostages. Why did they shoot them? Well, because they're used to shooting, escaping, retreating Palestinian civilians. That's precisely why. So that's exactly what they did. They are so good at killing journalists. They're so good at killing civilians. They're so good at executing people. They're so good at blowing shit up for no particular reason that, of course, this is not a serious military operation. This is not a tactical, surgical, precise military operation. It has the capacity to be one, but it refuses to be one because they're just not very good at what they're doing. They've gotten far too used to behaving as an occupying force that just shoots at children, shoots at retreating people, shoots at civilians, apprehends them, ritualistically humiliates them. And when you do this like mass shooting thing and you spray every single person and you pray, you're going to end up hitting people, a shit ton of Palestinian civilians, and you're going to also end up hitting even your own hostages, it turns out. The deaths were announced as a U.S. envoy said the U.S. and Israel were discussing a timetable for scaling back intense combat operations of the war against Hamas, even though they agree the overall fight will take months. Here's the issue. Shujaiya has been some of the most intense combat so far. This is where they also lost, I believe, 10 of their commanders, which was a devastating blow for the Israeli military. This is something that you have to remember. 5,000 dead Palestinian 18-year-olds who are orphaned and are looking to be martyred because this is all they know is very different than 5,000 Israeli soldiers that get wounded. Why? Because those 5,000 Israeli soldiers that get wounded have lives. They have something to look forward to. They have marketing jobs at home. That is a devastating blow to the confidence that the Israeli population has within their own military. Every time a Hamas militant dies, they're like, we're dying for a just cause. We're dying to defend our people. It's a massive moral victory for Hamas. And don't trust me on this. Trust the numbers. Hamas's popularity has only increased as a consequence of the Israeli occupation worsening and the Israeli siege upon the Gaza Strip, both in the West Bank and even in Gaza. The U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan also met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas to discuss the besieged enclave's post-war future, which, according to a senior U.S. official, could include bringing back Palestinian security forces driven from their jobs in Gaza by Hamas in its 2007 takeover. This is a massive fuck-up. Palestinians do not want Mahmoud Abbas. They have said it over and over again. But of course, in the most American way, our absolute dumbass monsters on the American side are like, well, Palestinians aren't human, so who gives a about what their opinions are on the matter? American and Israeli officials have been vague in public about how Gaza will be run if Israel achieves its goal of ending Hamas control. The notion that Palestinian security forces could return was floated as one of the several ideas. It appeared to be the first time Washington offered details on its vision for security agreements or arrangements in the enclave. Any role for the Palestinian security forces in Gaza is bound to elicit strong opposition from Israel, which seeks to maintain an open-ended security presence, which is ridiculous because even the American alternative, regardless of whatever the Israelis are saying, even the American alternative is not one that the Palestinians want. We looked at the numbers. They are profoundly unpopular. Mahmoud Abbas is the most unpopular Palestinian figure. Yahya Sinwar, Ismail Haniyeh, any number of different Hamas militants, Hamas officials are significantly more popular than Abbas and have gotten only more popular in this time frame. It's not just strong opposition. You are trying to do an Afghanistan or you are trying to do an Iraq upon a population that does not want these people. And the difference is it's not coming at the tail end of a 20-year occupation or a 10-year occupation or a 15-year occupation where the puppet administration is planted directly by American officials while American military presence is still there. Palestinians live within their leadership. They have an actual back and forth with their own leadership. You put Abbas as Abbas as the leader for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, everyone is going to lose their minds. It is such a ginormous fuck up in a sea of other ginormous fuck ups. The idea that you don't have to listen to the Palestinian people on who they think is a better person to lead them is coming from the same arrogance and same dehumanization. You're saying fuck up like it isn't intentional? No, it is a fuck up. You know why it's a fuck up? Because they don't have the bandwidth, brother. That's why it's a fuck up. Israel thinking that it can continue its maintenance of this occupation, continue the maintenance of its violent apartheid is a fuck up. That's how October 7 happened. If they could continue doing an apartheid upon the Palestinian public in the way that they have without any repercussions, that would not be a fuck up. But they don't have that. They don't have that control. It's hubris. It's arrogance. It's massively, massively bad for the Israeli population as well. It's taken 67 days for some people to come around to it. Maybe they won't because they are incredibly brainwashed and conditioned to think every Palestinian is not a real human being. That dehumanization is kicked in. However, it does not matter. This will continue. The violence will continue. Now they can't say they're only killing terrorists. Law. It was unintentional, though. They thought the refugees were Palestinians. Killing was intentional, but it was definitely a fuck up. Yeah, that's what I mean. Israel told us the thousands of Palestinian deaths were unfortunate collateral in the goal of extracting all hostages. Then they tried to oppose the ceasefires to extract hostages until there was too much pressure to do so. Now they shoot and kill more hostages, not to mention all the friendly fire deaths. At what point does this become absolutely untenable even for Israelis? Government clearly doesn't care about the hostages. Exactly. If you're a family member of the 3 Israeli hostages that were killed by the Israeli occupying force, you should be incredibly frustrated. It's very odd that people are refusing to see how devastatingly bad this has been for Israel. And by the way, Mohammed is correct. Just to be clear, the IDF killed these Israeli hostages because they thought they were Palestinian civilians. These were retreating Israeli hostages, and they shot and killed them. Like, think about it. This goes back to the lesser evil mentality of Hamas being the lesser evil in this situation. Hamas literally kidnapped these people, apprehended them, jailed them for 67 days. And guess what? Hamas didn't kill them. You know who killed them? Israel did. Think about that. If I'm living in Israel and I see this shit, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You had the opportunity to do a ceasefire. You did a ceasefire. You facilitated it for 6 days, and then you were too horny to get back into combat. Now you're killing even more hostages. This is the only thing we have right now is whatever the IDF has revealed, which is during combat in Shijaya, the IDF mistakenly identified 3 Israeli hostages as a threat and as a result fired towards them and the hostages were killed. Their bodies were transferred to the Israeli territory for examination where it was confirmed that they were 3 Israeli hostages and were identified. Yotam Chaim, who was kidnapped by Kibbutz Kfar Aza by the Hamas terrorist organization on October 7. Samer Talalka, who was kidnapped from the kibbutz near Am by the Hamas terrorist organization on October 7. The 3rd hostage's family has been notified and requested that his name not be broadcasted. IDF and Israeli police representatives have notified all 3 of the families. The IDF began reviewing the incident immediately. The IDF emphasizes that this is an active combat zone in which ongoing fighting over the last few days has occurred. Immediate lessons from the event have been learned, which have been passed on to all IDF troops on the field. The IDF expresses deep remorse over the tragic incident and sends the families its heartfelt condolences. Our national mission is to locate all the missing and return all the hostages home, which is not true. It's not their mission at all. Their mission is to kill as many Palestinians as possible within the boundaries of like the entire world, not rising up in arms. And they're actually losing sight of that as well. Why aren't they lying and saying Hamas killed them? I don't know. But I feel like it's because it's a broad daylight, I assume, or like a very clear situation, that it is virtually impossible for them to deny it.
Saying that it mistakenly killed.
I assume it's on camera. That's probably why. The IDF published photos of showing banners hung by 3 hostages mistakenly killed by Israeli troops in Gaza, which read, "Help, 3 hostages," and SOS. IDF spokesman said the building was located 200 meters from where the hostages were shot. They published the photos of the banners hung by the 3 hostages mistakenly killed by the Israeli troops. I don't know why they're like even revealing more of the details, the gruesome details of how they straight up executed their own hostages. I don't know why, especially because like this quite literally is turning into a major fuck up because it has led to the largest protest so far. Ombim Beyachad, I think I'm saying their name right, Stand Together, and many other groups that range from like the Israeli left to the far left, which is albeit marginal, have been protesting, and the hostage families have been protesting for a ceasefire since like October 7. However, the numbers have grown dramatically since the 3 Israeli hostages were executed by the Israeli occupying force. This is actually becoming quite problematic for them. And I don't know why they are giving into this, especially as this comes at the tail end of a 4-day communications blackout, which barely made a dent in American media. The IDF provides new details on yesterday's tragic incident. According to a senior officer in the Southern Command, citing an initial probe, the incident began after one soldier stationed in a building identified 3 suspicious figures exiting a building several dozen meters away. All 3 were shirtless, with one of the figures carrying a stick with a makeshift white flag. The soldier, who believed the men moving towards him was an attempt by Hamas to lure IDF soldiers into a trap, immediately opened fire and shouted "terrorist" to the other forces. According to the probe, the soldier that killed the 2 of the men, while the 3rd, who was hit and wounded, fled back into the building from which he came. At that stage, the commander of the battalion, who was also in the building where the soldier shot from, went outside and called on the forces to halt their fire. Meanwhile, sounds of someone shouting help in Hebrew were heard by troops in the area. Moments later, a 3rd man came out of the building to which he fled, and another soldier opened fire at him, killing him. The battalion commander then realized that the appearance of the 3rd man was unusual, and it was revealed to be an Israeli hostage. Think about that. Remember what I told you, that like it's impossible to distinguish between like Israelis and Palestinians because there is a shit ton of Israeli Arab Jews as well, and also obviously Palestinian citizens of Israel or Israeli Muslim citizens as well, like the Bedouin. This is part of the reason why their indiscriminate killing ends up actually causing a 20% friendly fire rate in the Israeli occupying force, because they're also terrified on top of that. The soldier who immediately opened fire upon identifying the 3 men did so against the protocols, as did the 2nd soldier who killed the 3rd man, according to the officer. Still, the IDF said it understands what led the soldiers to do so. In Shajaya, the senior officer says the IDF has not identified any Palestinian civilians in recent days. I wonder why. The officer says troops have killed at least 38 Palestinian terror operatives in Shajaya in recent days. The only people seen wearing civilian clothing have been Hamas operatives, often unarmed. The operatives collect weapons left behind in various buildings, open fire at troops, and then flee again, unarmed, to another building. The IDF has also encountered several seemingly unarmed civilians in Shajaya who later turned out to be Hamas suicide bombers. There's also been several attempts by Hamas in the area to lure soldiers into an ambush. On Wednesday, in what initially thought to be unrelated to yesterday's deadly mistaken shooting, the officer says several hundred meters away from the troops found a building with a spray paint SOS in English and another spray painted message reading in Hebrew, "Help, 3 hostages." The soldiers at the time believed the building was booby-trapped, but now the military is investigating a possible connection. Oh my God, they snitched on themselves. They showed this footage before they figured out that they were real hostages. Immediately following the incident, the IDF sent new protocols to ground troops. Does anyone have the general? They did a PR hit. Some IDF general is like speaking to his troops about how like we never kill hostages, of course. Right. We do not kill hostages. And then they're like, yeah, this is it. Yeah. You see 2 people there with their hands up without shirts. Take 2 seconds. And I want to tell you something. Just important. And if it's 2 Gazans with a white flag coming out to surrender, why would we shoot at them? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's not the IDF. That's like me saying that at the top of the hour, we don't serve a 3-minute ad break. That's not us. They're talking about how they would never shoot civilians. They wouldn't even shoot Palestinian civilians, right? Look at their response. Look at the reaction.
א', האירוע הוא אירוע מאוד קשה, כואב, אף אחד לא יבוא ויאמר אחרת. אבל אני אומר לכם,
But beyond that, we all understand this. I don't need to come and tell you this.
לספר לכם את זה. אני אומר לכם שזה אירוע,
I tell you that the situation could have easily not have happened.
בקלות יכול היה לא לקרות. ותחשבו, הרי למה באנו לתימון?
Why did we start the ground operation? We set 3 goals. Bro, I'm not one of those like they them military Andes at all, but this, like, I mean, this man That's a reservist, dog. What are we doing here? There's no better representation to me than like the Israeli occupying force being basically a assortment of like reservists than this. And no, this isn't fat shaming. Suck my dick. I'm not fat shaming at all. I'm simply talking about something that many people understand. There's constant PT when you're in the military, when you're a part of a unit, or when you're literally deployed. You're not going to look like a gravy seal. That's a reservist. You only get away with this if you're a cop.
והמשימה השלישית, השבת החטופים. עכשיו אנחנו כולנו מאוד רוצים את זה, ואני אומר לכם באירוע הזה, יצאו 3 אנשים. הם לקחו בחשבון שהם לוקחים סיכון שהם באים לכוח צה"ל. כדי להפחית את הסיכון, הם באמת חשבו, הורידו חולצות כדי שאף אחד לא יחשוב שיש להם מטען. החזיקו בד לבן על מות, לזהות את עצמם, באו, דיברו בעברית, קראו הצילו. ואנחנו, באמת,
and we really are soldiers whom I haven't met yet.
לא פגשתי אותם עוד. אבל אני בטוח
שהם הטובים
ביותר, כי
everyone wants to do well.
רוצים לעשות טוב.
Bro, he's talking about 3 dudes that just like were so fast and loose with their trigger finger that they clapped 3 shirtless, what they thought Palestinian at the time, civilians.
בטוח שהם היו בטוחים שהם עושים את הדבר הכי נכון. אבל אני מדבר איתכם לא כדי להגיד אם הם היו בסדר או לא, כדי שאנחנו קדימה נהיה בסדר.
I'm speaking to you not to say that they were right or wrong. Wait, what do you mean they were right or wrong? But so that we will be right going forward.
אם הם היו בסדר או לא, כדי שאנחנו קדימה נהיה בסדר. אתה רואה 2 אנשים, הם לא מאיימים עליך, הם לא עם נשק.
You see people, they aren't threatening you, they don't have a weapon. They are with their hands up and without shirts. Take 2 seconds.
ובוא, אני רוצה להגיד לכם
I want to
משהו
tell
לא
you something
פחות
just as
חשוב.
important.
ואם זה 2 עזתים,
And if it's 2 Gazans with a white flag coming out to surrender, why would we shoot at them? Absolutely not.
בשום פנים ואופן לא.
Absolutely not.
זה לא צה"ל, תקשיבו.
That's not the IDF. Okay, bro. Yeah. No, definitely. I'm telling you, whoever got confused here, even those who fought and now lay down their arms and raise their hands, we arrest them, we don't shoot them. Now, what he's describing here is literally standard operating procedure. What he's describing here, which is a laughable thing when you consider what they have done, is actually technically the SOP of like every modern military, because that is in accordance with the international humanitarian laws. Not following on this would be a war crime, except the reason why he has to reiterate this position is because they have been doing that all the time, and they've been doing it so much that they quite literally did it to their own hostages.
אנחנו לא יורים בהם כי צה"ל לא יורה בבן אדם שמרים ידיים.
We don't shoot them because the IDF doesn't shoot a person who has their hands up. Yeah, okay.
זה עוצמה, זה לא חולשה.
That's strength,
אני אומר לכם, אני נזכר.
Dude, they're laughing.
מה אמרתי לחיילים שלי?
There's cuts. What did he say that they're laughing?
זה עוצמה, זה לא חולשה. ואני אומר לכם, אני...
What? And I tell you, I remember.
אני נזכר. מה אמרתי לחיילים שלי?
What I said to my soldiers, a battalion commander.
לפני הכניסה פנימה לעזה בעופרת יצחק.
Why are they all laughing? What did he say?
המשפט אחרון בשיחה לפני לחימה. תעבדו עם הראש. אנחנו כל הזמן מרגישים שלחימה זה עם הידיים, לחימה זה עם הרגליים. אני אומר לכם, רבותיי, אל תפסיקו לחשוב שנייה אחת בלחימה.
I love that he has to be like, bro, please. Don't stop thinking. Please use your heads in combat. I know you guys are like indiscriminate little genocide machines, and that's all fine and dandy, but like, you know, you got to level it back a little bit. You got to dial it like maybe a couple notches back. You know, it's fine to kill the Palestinians, but like we just ended up real big time.
Yeah, and an IDF spokesman says the victims were misidentified as a threat and shot dead. CNN's Jeremy Diamond is in Sderot, Israel, with more on this tragic development. Jeremy, what more is the IDF saying about this?
Yeah, it's very sad news, and the Israeli military is admitting that soldiers effectively mistakenly identified these 3 Israeli hostages as a threat and shot and killed them during...
I suspect they'll probably say something along the lines of like they looked like Hamas militants or something. Like they were dressed up in like Hamas militant garb or something.
Combat operations being conducted in Shajaiya, which has been the scene of very heavy fighting between Israel and Hamas over the course of the last week. 2 of the 3 hostages have been identified. One of the families of the one of the deceased hostages asked that their name not be broadcast. But the two who we can tell you are Yotam Chaim, who was kidnapped from Kibbutz Kfar Aza on October 7th, and the second is Samer Talalka, who was kidnapped from Kibbutz Nir Am, also on October 7th.
Yeah, this is another one, by the way. Israeli hostage dies after failed rescue mission. This was from December 9th. This is from last week. 2 IDF commandos are also seriously wounded in the operation. Where this is literally the second time, I guess, this has happened.
Israeli military effectively recovered these bodies in Gaza, moved them to Israel, where they were taken to a forensic center and then subsequently positively identified as the bodies of 3 hostages who were kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th. Now, we should note amid all of this that this comes as the Israeli military had loosened its rules of engagement as it began this war in Gaza following those October 7th attacks, allowing Israeli soldiers to fire upon suspected terrorists while conducting fewer checks than they normally would have. This also comes as we know that some of those former hostages who were freed as part of that week-long truce between Israel and Hamas, they angrily confronted the Israeli Prime Minister last week, with one of those former hostages accusing the Israeli government of having no information and no intelligence about the whereabouts of these hostages, noting that the location where she was being kept by Hamas was actually shelled by the Israeli military. And today we are learning of a far more tragic and direct incident where Israeli forces appear to have fired upon Israeli hostages in Gaza, believing that they were a threat, and then ultimately realizing later after the fact that they were indeed hostages. Boris, Pam.
Jeremy, you mentioned the loosened.
Israeli government is always small bean, by the way. It's always small bean Israeli government. When they're killing their own soldiers or their own hostages, when there's a friendly fire incident, small bean government, small bean military, oopsies all around.
Rules of engagement. Obviously, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in the Middle East right now. He's expressed the Biden administration's concern about the intensity of the IDF offensive. Of course, President Biden's desire for Israel to tone it down. How do you think this news is going to play into the tone of these talks?
Well, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, hostage negotiations are one of the key elements of Jake Sullivan's visit and meetings with Israeli officials. But as you noted, one of the other focuses is indeed the civilian casualty count. I mean, we have watched as now nearly 19,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. Some of those combatants, many of those non-combatants, including over 7,000 children who are believed to be among those who have been killed in Gaza, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Health. And Jake Sullivan said earlier today that he believes Israel intends to distinguish between Hamas targets and civilians, but that intention does not always line up with the reality on the ground.
They're saying, wait, what? I can't even see it. Oh, dude, it is. I told you. Yep. The IDF couldn't identify the hostage because the sick and barbaric Hamas members probably wear IDF uniforms they stole from the dead soldiers and civilian clothes as a means to hide within civilian population. Wait, what? Many of them attacked, filmed in t-shirts done by men in t-shirts and a scarf. Yeah. Again, first of all, no. Wearing enemy combatants' uniform is not allowed. That is true. And Hamas has done that. They did it on October 7th. That is a war crime. You cannot wear the garb of your enemy. That part is correct. Now, having said that, however, this is maximalist cope. What do I mean by this? They did that on October 7th. The idea that is the reason why the IDF is killing their own soldiers is ridiculous, though, because there have been plenty of friendly fire incidents so far on the Strip, all around, and the notion that like the only reason why the friendly fire is happening because they always just mistakenly think that Hamas is wearing IDF garb is ridiculous. They have maxed out on the copium. No, it's because you suck shit. You're a dog shit military that's only used to killing babies and shit. You're used to sniping nurses in a hospital with a drone from afar. That's why. It's cop shit. The quicker you understand that, the easier this is. They are used to fighting a civilian force that doesn't have a lot of weapons, that has no way of fighting back. They're used to killing people in the West Bank. That's it. It's a cop army. And that's what happens when you're the cop army, full of reservists that are like doing normal human being stuff, living a normal life, having a marketing job and shit, and having a wife and children, and used to a hot meal. Take a guy like that and take him out of that situation, put him into a hotbed full of like 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old orphans using Kalashnikovs and RPGs with rockets they made in a goddamn bathtub at their own backyard inside of a concentration camp full of tunnel systems, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, why are the trees talking to me? What is happening? Holy I'm terrified. Very different circumstance to fight a counter-insurgency war against a enemy force that has nowhere else to go, that has basically embedded itself within the population for almost 2 decades, and even longer than that, really. Copium is looking at that situation and going, well, they wear IDF garb from time to time. Like, get the fuck out of here. Then don't shoot at them, dumbass. What are you talking about? I said this before. October 7 might have been an operation, a militancy operation that was an offensive operation, and therefore there was plenty of war crimes that were conducted. That was an act of terror. That's all valid. But right now, Israel is doing the act of terror. And what Hamas is doing and what the Palestinian militancy is doing is called resistance. It's just. It is moral. It is just. It is appropriate. What are you supposed to do? Take it? Just sit back and allow Israel to just like destroy your entire semblance of a nation at this point? Yeah, of course not. Let's finish this and I'll get to
Jeremy
the
Diamond,
concreous
thank you so much.
Concreous cope.
And joining us now is IDF spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, how did this happen? What can you tell us?
Yes, good evening.
Yeah, same logic with the Ukrainian Nazis fighting back. No, I don't like them, but the cause is just. In that situation, we've also talked about this. I literally talked about why Russia invading basically solidifies support for literally every Azov battalion motherfucker out there. Straight up. What are you supposed to do? Not fight back when someone is invading your country? It's ridiculous. Of course they're going to fight back.
Evening, it's night here in Israel. A very sad and tragic event, one that the IDF, of course, terribly regrets and has told that to the families. We are investigating how it happened. One of the contributing factors are obviously related to the fact, or can obviously be related to the fact that so far what we have encountered on the battlefield are many Hamas combatants that have been dressed in civilian clothes. And I'm quite sure that that has been part of the issue here, but it's still very early to understand and to say certain things. What we can say and confirm is what we have issued officially. A very sad event, tragic event. It, of course, goes against everything that's what we have been trying to do for the last 2 months, more than 2 months. It's day 70 of the fighting. But
bro, you've killed like 50 hostages in bombings already. What do you mean we're going to fucking reevaluate? You already more efficiently liquidated half of the hostages. And then on top of that, now you're killing them point blank. What are we doing here? It seems like no matter what Israel, no matter what kind of action Israel takes in the Gaza Strip, it always ends up killing hostages.
Even a sad event like this will not shake our resolve, and it will not divert us from the focus, which is clear.
He's like, bro, Hamas is not playing fair. They don't have like, they're not clearly identifying themselves with like a red orb around them. You know what I mean? It's really fucked up. It's really fucked up because like in Call of Duty, there's no team killing. And like, so I'm thinking I can kill as many civilians as I want. And if I shoot at my own team, then they'll be fine. And then they die. I don't know what's going on. What the
clear to dismantle Hamas and safely to Israelis.
Sir, you broke up there at the end, but I'm curious because you mentioned that the IDF is still trying to get details on exactly what transpired. In a statement from the IDF, it says that...
Ellen News says, I do feel like essentially they're treating the remaining hostages almost already dead with these tactics. Let me tell you something. They've been doing that since day one. There are conversations on October 8th in closed door settings that I have covered. I've covered on October 8th. They said those hostages are as good as dead with what we are going to do to Gaza. Is the prevailing attitude that many in the war cabinet immediately had since day one. And they showed that because what did they do on October 8th? They started bombing Gaza. Instead of going, hold on, let's secure our border. Let's secure the kibbutzim. Let's figure this shit out first. Let's come up with a valid plan. No, they didn't do that. They started indiscriminately blowing up the Gaza Strip immediately. And when you do that, you very openly state, like, I don't really give a shit about the hostages. Sucks to suck, lol. Shouldn't have gotten caught is basically the mentality that the Israeli war cabinet has. Straight up.
Immediate lessons from the event have been learned, which have been passed on to all IDF troops in the field. Can you share what those lessons were, if there's going to be a different approach by the IDF?
Is Hamas even doing anything at this point? Any operations seem like they're just getting shelled to hell and back? Yes, of course. Like I said, they killed like 10 commanders, like literally yesterday, 2 days ago. Here's an update on the hostage families. The families of the abductees are now going out for a demonstration of outrage demanding a deal. Time is up and our patience is over. Yeah, they haven't stopped demonstrating, but this will only increase the intensity of the demonstrations at this point. Here's the thing. Israel keeps propping up a narrative internally that they're killing everybody in Gaza. They're doing such a good job with their military operations. But if they were doing such a good job in their military operations, they wouldn't have to literally strip down hundreds of Palestinian men and act like every single person that they've stripped down is like a Hamas militant that is surrendering because of the sheer firepower, the superiority of the Israeli occupying force, with literal photographic evidence actually showing that those guys that are being stripped down and being humiliated and being apprehended aren't actually Hamas at all. If that was the case, if they were all Hamas, then you wouldn't have like literal Israeli accounts looking at the situation and going, see, they're saying UNRWA. These guys are saying these are UNRWA people, but it's only to me, it shows UNRWA is Hamas. UN is Hamas. This doctor is a terrorist doctor. They keep posting their own goddamn L's. If they were a worthwhile military, this would have been over already. No, that's also not true. No, man, that is not true at all. America has one of the best militaries on the planet, and even the American military would be sucking dog shit right now. I don't think people understand urban warfare, urban counterinsurgency operations are profoundly difficult, especially when you are fighting against a militia force that, one, is pretty decently trained, ready for combat, and is embedded in the population for 30 years. They have 300, 400 miles of 400 kilometers of tunnel networks under the entirety of the Gaza Strip. That is not a normal situation at all. They're not even in the jungle at this point. They're directly in urban areas, and they're treating the urban area like it's a jungle. But here's what happens. When you raise the Gaza Strip, thinking that you are going to get to the tunnel systems, or only because you know that this will break the backs or break the will of the Palestinian population, when you raise the Gaza Strip and you kill thousands of Palestinian civilians, all you have done is change the combat area and made it even less likely to succeed, because now you got people poking out of the different holes that you now created. Because for Hamas and for the Palestinian resistance, they don't give a shit. Their tunnels are underneath. Their tunnels are in the ground. So it doesn't matter when you blow up the building on top of it. You just only created a less stable environment, made it harder for your tanks to go through, and made it harder for your troops to walk through that area, because now there's even more holes they can shoot from. Ultimately, you're basically fighting ghosts. The chatter is correct. Silver Crow is correct. You're fighting ghosts at that point. It is incredibly difficult. No modern military has been able to successfully implement counterinsurgency initiatives in urban combat that is like profoundly successful with very limited civilian casualties. And let me tell you, it has never happened historically. Okay, people are saying Stalingrad again, exactly, but it certainly will not happen with the Israeli occupying force, because they're also not good on top of that. Oh, by the way, you're saying Russia cleared Mariupol. Yeah, but what did they do in Mariupol? When they cleared Mariupol, when they engaged in urban counterinsurgency operations in Mariupol, they also had a exit corridor for all of the people that were in Mariupol. And Mariupol didn't have 400 kilometers of tunnel systems underneath it. And it was a incredibly difficult, incredibly costly battle in general. We're talking about Ukraine now. This is why the Financial Times article that came out early on was really good, talking about Hamas, not from the framework of like barbaric rapist monster terrorists, but instead the Viet Cong, because their tactics are closer to the Vietnamese Liberation Front. Their tactics are closer to decolonial tactics that the Vietnamese army used. Anyway, this is a ginormous fuck up from Israel, because let's be real, the Israeli population does not give a shit about Palestinians being killed, no matter what their age is. Okay, come on. We know that from the studies conducted in Israel. There have been two that we've looked at before, one from the Israeli Democracy Institute, another one from, I think it was a university in Israel as well. They don't give a shit when Palestinians die, when Palestinian civilians die. It doesn't matter if it's collateral damage. It doesn't matter if it's deliberate. They don't give a shit. However, they do care if the IDF kills their own people. So this is another major blow. They care when IDF soldiers die, and they care when they kill their own hostages. So the fact that they're admitting to it is really interesting, and I don't know what will come of it. Violence has become significantly more personal since the ceasefire ended. What I mean by that is that they're not necessarily just like indiscriminately bombing, which they have continued to do, but on top of that, they are now also engaging in direct acts of terror, like having IDF, Israeli occupying force soldiers, going in and shooting people in camps and arresting and apprehending people. Why are they doing this? Well, they're doing this because they recognize that they're running out of time. Not necessarily running out of time as far as like the international opinion sours on Israel's indiscriminate acts of violence, but they're running out of time within Israel as well. Because the more information comes out of Israeli occupying forces dying or being severely wounded, the more the opinion will sour. There's also a massive economic cost to conducting these operations. There's the economic cost of, like, obviously the Houthis blocking off certain ports basically with their consistent military operations. But then there's also the economic cost of, like, trying to maintain an occupying force of a shit ton of reservists that you have to pay for, that you have to feed. That's not something that you can maintain. America is a country that basically runs on having endless military occupations all around the world, and even then, there is an economic cost to it. What do you think about the Houthis going sicko mode with every Israeli ally, and why are they based? Houthis are very interesting people, I will just say. They are personally saying, we are going to do everything we can to make Israel's siege on Gaza as costly as possible. That's their stated goal, that's their intention, and that's what they're doing. You should also mention the economic cost of Israel denying 600,000 Palestinian workers from entering since the start of the war. There's also that too. They're losing their cheap labor force as well.